Conceptual clarification and structural error. The confusion between Vidhan Sabha and Rajya Sabha is not a minor systematic mistake. It reflects a failure to distinguish between federal layers of governance. India's political architecture is deliberately stratified. Each institution exists within a specific constitutional logic. When these are conflated, the result is just not a incorrect terminology, but a distorted understanding of how power is distributed, exercised, and reproduced. The Indian state is neither purely unitary nor purely federal. It is a hybrid system where the central government and the states operate in parallel but asymmetric domains. The Vidhan Sabha belongs to the state domain while the Rajya Sabha belongs to the union domain. Treating them as interchangeable reveals a lack of structural awareness. The architecture of Indian federalism. India's constitutional design establishes a dual policy consisting of the union and the states, each of its own spheres of authority. The constitution distributes legislative execution and financial powers through the union list, state list, and the concurrent list. Within this framework, the Vidhan Sabha serves as the primary legislative body at the state level. It is the arena where political competition translates into government authority. State elections, therefore, are fundamentally contests for control over this institution. In contrast, the Rajya Sabha operates within the Union Parliament alongside the Lok Sabha. Its function is not to govern states directly but to represent them indirectly within national lawmaking. This distinction is foundational. One determines executive power within a state, the other influences legislative outcomes at the national level. The Vidhan Sabha, core instrument of state power. The Vidhan Sabha is the decisive arena of state level politics. It is composed of directly elected representatives chosen through universal adult suffrage. Every 5 years or sooner it dissolves. Voters determine which political party or coalition will command a majority. That majority translates into executive control, with the leader of the majority becoming the chief minister. This is where real and immediate power lies at the state level. Control over law enforcement, public health, education, agriculture, and local economic regulation. The Vidhan Sabha is not symbolic. It is operational. It determines policy, direction, allocates state's budget, exercises oversight over the execution. When people refer to state elections, they are referring exclusively to elections for this body. Any alternative interpretation is structurally wrong. Electoral mechanics and incentive structures. Elections to the Vidhan Sabha follow the first past the poll system, similar to national parliamentary elections. Constituencies are territorially defined. Candidates compete to secure plurality of votes. The system incentivizes localized campaigning, caste and community mobilization, as well as targeted patronage networks. Political actors optimize for constituency level dominance rather than proportional representation. This result is a fragmented but highly responsive electoral environment where macro level dynamic can determine macro level outcomes. Power is accumulated seat by seat, not through aggregate vote share alone. The stakes are immediate: control over state machinery, access to resources, and influence over administrative appointments. This is why state elections are intensely competitive and often more volatile than national elections. The Rajya Sabha, indirect representation and strategic leverage. The Rajya Sabha occupies a fundamentally different position. It is the upper chamber of India's bicameral parliament, designed to represent the states at the national level without being subject to direct electoral pressures. Its members are elected indirectly by the elected members of the Vidhan Sabhas through a system of proportional representation using a single transferable vote. This means that the composition of the Rajya Sabha is a derivative outcome of state election results, not a direct expression of voter choice. It represents as a revising chamber reviewing, amending, and sometimes delaying legislation passed by the Lok Sabha. While it doesn't determine government formation, it can constrain or facilitate legislative agendas. Its power is subtle but strategic, particularly in situations where the ruling party lacks a majority in the upper house. Interdependence without equivalence. This is a structural relationship between the Vidhan Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, but this relationship is hierarchical in terms of electoral origin. The Vidhan Sabha is the primary source of democratic legitimacy at the state level. The Rajya Sabha derives part of its composition from that legitimacy but operates in a different institutional arena. State elections influence the Rajya Sabha indirectly by altering the pool of legislators who elect its members. However, this doesn't convert the Rajya Sabha into a state election body. It remains a national institution with a distinct constitutional role. Confusing the two collapses this layered structure into a single, undifferentiated concept, which is analytically invalid. Political strategy and power accumulation. From a strategic standpoint, control over the Vidhan Sabha is not a direct pathway to executive authority, while influence over the Rajya Sabha is a secondary long-term objective. Political parties prioritize state elections not only to govern states but also to build a pipeline of influence that extends into the national legislature. A party that dominates multiple states' assemblies can gradually reshape the composition of the Rajya Sabha, therefore enhancing its ability to pass or block national legislation. This creates a layered strategy of power accumulation, immediate control through Vidhan Sabhas and delayed leverage through the Rajya Sabha. Misunderstanding this distinction leads to flawed strategic assumptions where real power is contested and how it is consolidated. Consequences of conceptual confusion. Failure to distinguish between these institutions produces second order and third order effects. At the first order, it leads to incorrect descriptions of electoral processes. At the second order, it results in flawed analysis of political outcomes, such as misattributing shifts in natural legislative dynamics to direct voter action rather than institutional mechanisms. At the third order, it undermines any attempt to build a coherent model of political power because the foundational categories are misaligned. In practical terms, this means misjudging where to focus attention, resources, and strategic effort. If the objective is to understand or influence state governance, the Vidhan Sabha is not only relevant arena. The Rajya Sabha becomes relevant only when the focus shifts to national lawmaking and the long-term legislative control. Final delineation of institutional roles. The distinction is absolute. The distinction is absolute. The Vidhan Sabha is the locus of state elections, the site of direct democratic competition, and the mechanism through which state governments are formed. The Rajya Sabha is an indirectly elected chamber of the national parliament designed to provide continuity and represent state interests at national level. One is immediate, executive, and locally grounded. The other is indirect, legislative, and nationally oriented. Any attempt to merge these categories is not just imprecise, it invalidates the structural logic of the Indian political system.